There's a difference between being polite and being compliant, but it's a line many people are taught to blur. Courtesy can be a charming illusion. It resembles kindness and feels like virtue. But in the wrong hands, or at the wrong time, it turns into a weapon. Not one used against others, but one that works against you. Machiavelli recognized this centuries ago. He didn't reject manners themselves, he rejected their misuse. According to him, there were times when politeness didn't just weaken you, it marked you as prey. When offered blindly, politeness sends a clear signal: I'd rather be liked than respected. I'll suppress my instincts to avoid discomfort. I'll keep things smooth, even if it means compromising myself. And when manipulators, opportunists, or power seekers detect that, they don't feel grateful, they feel emboldened. Machiavelli would argue that there are moments when you must put politeness aside. When pleasantries, polite smiles, and softened tones must be dropped. When a thank you becomes silence. When sorry becomes that's your problem. When a handshake turns into a cold refusal. Not because you're becoming cruel, but because you're finally seeing clearly. That brings us to the first situation where being polite becomes a liability, when someone crosses a boundary you never gave them permission to test. Some people don't ask for power, they test for it. They make subtle pushes. They overstep in small, calculated ways. They say things that land just on the edge of inappropriateness. They move too close. They interrupt you, then act as if you're the one being rude. And most people, in response, smile awkwardly. They laugh it off. They try to preserve the atmosphere. They say things like, "Oh, no worries, it's fine," or "Ha, maybe I'm just being sensitive." But this is the moment Machiavelli would call the test. Because right here, they're sizing you up. And if you answer with politeness, they've learned something about you that they won't forget: you value being agreeable more than standing your ground. From that point forward, they won't return as a peer, they'll return as someone who believes they can manage you. Machiavelli's advice? Flip the script. Don't argue. Don't raise your voice. Just make it cold. Make it clear. Look them in the eye and say, "Don't do that again." Or calmly state, "I didn't give you permission." Or say nothing, let the silence hang, then walk away. That silence will speak louder than any explanation, and it will leave one message behind: I'm not the one. And here's another moment where politeness works against you: when someone apologizes, not to make things right, but to manipulate. Not every apology is sincere. Some are just a strategy to lower your defenses. Pay attention. They cross a line, then rush to apologize. But it lacks depth. There's no real remorse, only a polished performance. They want your forgiveness on cue. Your kindness on demand. And if you're still operating from politeness, you feel cornered. You don't want to look resentful. You don't want to drag things out. So you respond with, "It's okay. I understand. I forgive you." But underneath those words, what you're actually saying is, "You can hurt me, then reset the dynamic whenever you want, just say the right things, and I'll fall back in line." You've handed over control of the healing process. Machiavelli would dismantle that reflex completely. He'd tell you, there's no nobility in forgiving someone who uses your need to seem graceful as leverage. You owe no one comfort just because they've said the word sorry. Not every apology deserves to be accepted. And you're under no obligation to ease the weight of the damage they caused. Instead, pause. Let the apology hang in the air. Let it land, and stay unanswered. You can say nothing. Or you can simply say, "I heard you." Or, "Thanks for saying that." But let it be known, it doesn't change anything. That's not bitterness. That's sovereignty. And for a manipulator, there's nothing more terrifying than someone who refuses to be soothed back into submission. Now consider the third situation, the chronic victim. You know the type. Every story they tell places them at the center, as both the hero and the one who's always wronged. They're constantly being excluded, misunderstood, targeted, dismissed. And every time they speak, they aren't looking for truth or clarity, they're fishing for sympathy. And if you're polite, you start playing along. You nod. You agree. You say, "That's awful." Or, "That's so unfair." And just like that, you've stepped into their narrative. But here's the reality, they're feeding off your attention, your patience, your willingness to empathize. And slowly, often without realizing it, you become their emotional caretaker. Machiavelli would shut that down immediately. He'd recognize it for what it is, emotional manipulation disguised as neediness. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't explain. He'd break the loop. He'd say, "You always seem to end up in the same situation." Or simply, "Do you ever take ownership for your part?" Or, "Nothing at all, just a sharp change in subject." That kind of cold break snaps their grip, because silence gives them nothing to feed on. And you can't trap someone in a pattern if they refuse to play along. These are just the first 3 situations where unchecked politeness doesn't protect you, it exposes you. It opens doors that were better left closed and signals to others that your boundaries are flexible, even when they shouldn't be. Machiavelli took a different approach. He wasn't impolite, he was deliberate. When he withdrew politeness, it was like removing oxygen from a flame. The manipulation lost its spark. The performance collapsed. The hollow apologies vanished. He didn't need to raise his voice or lash out. He simply chose presence over performance, and that was enough to reset the dynamic. Some will claim that politeness is always the nobler path. But Machiavelli knew better. He understood that in many moments, politeness isn't a sign of strength, it's fear wearing the mask of virtue. And it becomes most dangerous when it's automatic, when the smile isn't coming from calm confidence, but from fear of confrontation. Politeness has become the most accepted form of self-betrayal, a polished way to hand over your power while appearing graceful. The fourth situation where politeness becomes a liability is when someone deliberately wastes your time. There are 2 kinds of time wasters in this world, the unaware and the strategic. The first you can forgive. The second, the one who avoids clarity, schedules meaningless meetings, stalls decisions, or keeps you in limbo just to assert subtle dominance, that person isn't being careless. They're testing how much of yourself you're willing to give away. They're measuring how long you'll wait. How far you'll bend your schedule. How much of your momentum you'll sacrifice to accommodate their avoidance. And when you respond with politeness, with nods, smiles, and reassurances like "no worries, take your time," you've failed the test. You've just sent the message, "My time only matters if you say it does." And to Machiavelli, that signaled one of the deepest weaknesses. Why? Because once your time becomes negotiable, so does your authority. And the moment someone senses they can stall your progress at will, you've lost control, hand it over, not through confrontation, but through courtesy. Machiavelli wouldn't tolerate that. He'd interrupt. He'd walk out. Not from arrogance, but from clarity. Because to him, time was the one resource you never bargain with. So, the next time someone deliberately wastes yours, stop smiling. Stop filling in the silence. Say, "Let me know when you're ready to move forward." Or even better, "This doesn't seem like a priority, let's reconnect when it is." That single sentence does more than any number of polite reminders, because in that moment, you become the limited resource. And people don't take lightly what they fear they might lose. The fifth situation is when someone tries to intimidate you using passive power. This one is the most subtle and the most dangerous. You're not being shouted at or openly insulted. But you feel the shift. The condescension. The calculated silence. The offhand sarcasm. The way they say your name just a beat too slowly. The delay before they answer, just long enough to imply they're above you. And you, being polite, try to keep the peace. You stay calm. You smile. You act unbothered. But deep down, you shrink. And the worst part? They know. Because their power isn't in their words, it's in how you react. Machiavelli understood this form of psychological warfare better than anyone. He studied quiet dominators. He knew that some people don't confront you to cause a scene, they push subtly, just enough to test how solid your self-image is. And if you meet that pressure with politeness, they win. Because in this context, politeness becomes silent surrender. It tells them, you can undermine me, as long as you do it quietly. That's when you hold the line. You don't need to mirror their energy. You just need to refuse the bait. How? Strip away their reward. Their effect. Their sense of control. They speak with veiled superiority. You cut through with, let's keep it on track. Or, if you have something to say, be direct. You hold eye contact without flinching. You respond without a smile. You remove every trace of softness from your tone, not to attack, but to stand grounded in neutrality. That's how Machiavellians win, not by getting louder, but by raising the standard for what they tolerate. And that brings us to what all 5 of these situations point to. The world expects you to be polite. It counts on it. Because politeness makes you predictable, and predictable people are easy to corner, manipulate, dismiss. But once politeness becomes a choice, not a reflex, you become something rare, someone who can't be steered. This isn't about being harsh. It's about becoming unshakable. It's about sending a message, I choose when to be soft, and no one else decides that for me. Walk into any room with that energy, and the dynamic shifts instantly. Because politeness has been society's leash since childhood. It taught you to smile when you were disrespected. To laugh when you felt uncomfortable. To apologize for simply existing. And it's time to cut the leash. Machiavelli would have torn that leash off, not to be provocative, but to reclaim his freedom. So when in doubt, ask yourself, am I being polite because I genuinely mean it, or because I'm afraid of what might happen if I'm not? If it's fear, drop it. If it's instinct, refine it. If it's habit, break it. Because there's a time for grace, and a time for steel. And only those who are dangerous know the difference. Politeness does have its place, but Machiavelli understood that most people don't know where that place is. They confuse it with morality. With decency. With virtue. But here's the truth, politeness is just a mask. And masks are only useful until they start to suffocate you. When you wear that mask for the wrong people or at the wrong time, it doesn't protect your reputation, it weakens it. Eventually, you stop being seen as someone with presence and power, and start being known as someone who simply makes others comfortable. People stop recognizing your standards, your principles, your clarity, and start recognizing your ability to make everyone else feel good, even when it costs you. Machiavelli wouldn't tolerate that kind of erosion. He didn't believe in cruelty for its own sake, but he did believe in well-placed coldness. Because the person who's always polite is the one who's always available. And the one who's always available. Eventually they're overlooked. Or worse, used. So how do you flip the script entirely? Let's walk through how these principles work in real life, and how to hardwire them so deeply that they become your default. First, redefine what politeness really means. Most people think politeness is about not interrupting, not disagreeing, letting others finish, smiling when uncomfortable, saying it's okay when it isn't, or keeping the peace at your own expense. But that's not politeness, that's emotional submission. True politeness is a chosen stance, not a default setting. It only has power when it's a decision. If you can't turn it off, it's not strategy, it's a liability. A man is only respected when people know he could go cold at any moment. Second, learn to switch from polite to cold without hesitation. People should feel the shift when a line is crossed. If someone wastes your time, you stop being warm and turn unreadable. If someone tries to exploit your kindness, you stop engaging. You stop explaining. You go silent. People quickly learn who they can test, who they can delay, who they can push. And the ones who win in life, they're not the most agreeable. They're the ones who train others how to treat them. When used intentionally, politeness becomes a form of power, because it shows you're choosing peace, not submitting to it. Third, eliminate sorry from your go-to language. One of the clearest signs of automatic, unconscious politeness is habitual apologizing. You say sorry when asking for clarity. You say sorry when they're the one who's late. You apologize for your tone, even when your words were honest. You even say sorry for saying no. Machiavelli would have caught this tendency at the root. Why? Because apologizing for your boundaries sends the same signal as not having any. It's one thing to own real harm. That's integrity. But most modern apologies come from fear of being perceived as difficult, firm, or too direct. And here's the truth, people who are firm aren't cruel, they're respected. They're trusted. They don't get pushed around. So instead of sorry, I can't, say, that doesn't work for me. Instead of sorry for the delay, say, here's the update. Instead of sorry I was blunt, say nothing at all. You'll be surprised how fast the energy around you shifts. People quickly learn not to test those who never apologize for having strength. Fourth, stop running from tension, use it. Most people never realize that politeness is often just a way to escape discomfort. Someone gives you a veiled insult. You smile, trying not to rock the boat. A coworker interrupts you. You laugh it off. A family member crosses a boundary. You say, I know, to avoid pushback. Machiavelli would have done the opposite. He wouldn't avoid tension, he'd master it. Not to create drama, but to reclaim authority. He would have said, you're trying to take control. That ends here. If you're not finished, I'll wait, but I'm not continuing until you are. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not asking. These aren't the words of someone trying to keep the peace. They're the stance of someone who refuses to shrink. Because silence carries weight. Stillness hits harder than charm. When you hold your ground through discomfort, the other person feels it, deeper than any pleasant smile ever could. That's the whole point. Politeness isn't your identity, it's a tool. And that's the exact recalibration Machiavelli would train into you. Stop being automatically agreeable. Become someone who chooses when, and to whom, to show softness. Let your politeness unsettle. Let it be crisp, intentional, and precise. Not submissive. Not accommodating. Strategic. Be the kind of person whose thank you, I appreciate that, no worries, makes people pause, because they know it just as easily could have been. That's not acceptable. Don't speak to me that way. Or worse, complete silence. The one who always speaks gently is easy to overlook. But the one who chooses when to be polite becomes the force others quietly adjust themselves around. You don't need to shout. You don't need to cause a scene. You don't need to perform toughness to prove strength. You only need to pull back politeness when it's expected by weakness, and offer it only to those who've truly earned it. That's what Machiavelli would have done. That's what makes a person unforgettable, not because they're loud, but because they're unreadable. Politeness is a currency. And like any currency, its value drops when it's handed out carelessly. Machiavelli didn't fear being disliked. He feared being disrespected. Because power isn't built on affection, it's built on respect. Affection fades. But the impression left by your coldness, that stays. And here's what most people never understand: the people who truly respect you don't need your politeness. What they value is your clarity, your consistency, and your refusal to fold when it matters most. Once you master strategic politeness, everything shifts. You no longer blend in, you become the one who sets the tone. And when someone mistakes that politeness for weakness, you don't correct them, you disappear. Because the most Machiavellian move isn't a fight. It's walking away, not to punish, but to make one thing clear: access to you isn't automatic. You might ask, how do I use this power without losing my humanity? What if I go too far? What if I shut down in the wrong moments? Here's the answer: you're not eliminating politeness, you're taking it off autopilot. You've been taught to offer it as a reflex, like a servant bowing without thought, or prey lowering its gaze. But that's not kindness. That's inherited submission. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in rejecting warmth, it was in recognizing when warmth becomes dangerous. He would say, be polite to those beneath you, but never let them think you're weak. Be polite to your peers, but only when respect is mutual. Be polite to superiors, but only until you've outgrown them. Everything else? Strategic silence. This is the shift, from automatic to intentional. Politeness should never be expected, it should make people wonder. Why is he polite to me? What would happen if I pushed too far? Has he gone cold on others before? Once people start asking themselves those questions about you, you're no longer just nice, you're unpredictable. And that, according to Machiavelli, is where real power begins. You don't need people confused, just unsure. Because uncertainty alone is enough to stop them from trying to control you. And then comes the final moment, the one where politeness must be dropped entirely. It happens in every power dynamic. Someone crosses a line. They ignore your signals. They push one time too many. They smile while quietly disrespecting you across the table. Most people, wanting to keep the peace, still try to smooth things over. They play nice. They try to salvage rapport. But not you. You sever the connection. No reaction. No explanation. No escalation. You go still. You go silent. Expressionless. You pull all the warmth from the room and leave them to feel the full weight of their misstep. And in that silence, they realize, this isn't someone I can treat like everyone else. That realization, wordless, but undeniable, is your true Machiavellian mark. Here's the bottom line: politeness is a tactic, not a truth. You're not here to be easy to swallow. You're not here to shrink yourself just to stay likable. You're not here to justify every move, to smile through every slight, or to dull your edges for anyone's comfort. You're here to move forward. To build. To take up space, and let others adjust to you. If they misunderstand your coldness, so be it. If they call you rude, distant, or intimidating, let them. They're confusing strategy with cruelty. And that confusion is theirs to carry. Your real problem is this: every time you choose politeness over firmness, every time you say it's okay when it's not, every time you smile when you should stay silent, you're not just teaching others how to treat you, you're teaching yourself that your strength is optional. But it's not. So be polite when it's earned. And when it's not, be Machiavellian. Let silence speak. Let the coldness settle. Let the tension linger. Because in the end, they won't remember what you said, only how it felt.